Hey guys, Scarlett here. I hope you all are doing well. So I have a bit more of a casual chat video for you guys today. And last week I was watching the YouTube channel called The Pagan Perspective. And it's a really fun YouTube channel where they have weekly topics that everyone kind of shares their own opinions on. And their recent topic was titled, "What is your ideal IRL pagan community?" And if you're unfamiliar, IRL just means in real life. So they're not referring to our online communities, which is something I'm very familiar with as I am a pagan YouTuber, but instead what our real life pagan communities are like. So I thought it was a fun topic, and it was something that's kind of dear to my heart because I've shared, my own opinions on the pagan community in some of my previous videos, and I will link those below in case you wanted to check them out. And I've thought a lot about how we can build our community and bring it together. And actually, just this past week for my most recent episode on my podcast, the Cosmic Keys podcast, we interviewed Jacob, who is a fellow Norse pagan, and community was one of the things that we really talked a lot about on that podcast episode, as it's one of his main goals is to really kind of bring the Norse pagan community together, and he actually wants to build a hall, so build a ritual and community space. So in general, community has just been on my mind a lot lately, so I thought I would share my own 2 cents on this topic. And before we get started, I just want to give a big welcome to anyone new here. I create weekly content about topics like paganism, witchcraft, tarot, and spirituality. So if you are interested in those topics as well, I do hope you will enjoy this video and consider subscribing. And for my returning subscribers, welcome back. So let's jump right into the video. So I've been a pagan since I was a teenager. So over the years, I've attended quite a few different types of pagan events. And that's from kind of large style conventions or pagan pride events all the way to, small scale meetup groups and workshops and things like that. And the first thing I wanted to mention about my ideal IRL pagan community would be that I would love for it to be more focused on education and less focused on shopping and consumerism. So this opinion might turn a few heads. I hope I'm not being too controversial here, but I personally am kind of a bit of a pagan minimalist. This is a topic that I've, discussed in the past and I've made a few videos on, so I'm not really into buying too much stuff when it comes to my own spiritual practice. And one of the things I've noticed over the years, I've found that a lot of events seem to be focusing more and more on having a lot of booths for vending, for selling objects, and a bit of a de-emphasis on their educational workshops. So for me, I'm not, really into the shopping aspect of attending these large pagan events and community spaces, and I would prefer if there were more educational opportunities at these events, because the reason I attend them is to, on the one hand, meet with and connect with new members that I haven't met yet in this community, and to learn from them. I really want to use these events as an opportunity to expand my own knowledge on a variety of topics. Now, I definitely don't mean to disparage any of those that do sell items or make a living through selling items to the pagan and witch community. I think it's really awesome that people are able to dedicate their life to providing stuff for our community, and I think that's awesome. Though I personally, and this might be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I personally would be more interested in seeing booths where people are selling handmade or artisan items as opposed to those selling stuff from China. And maybe it's just me, but I've noticed over the years, seeing more and more booths selling kind of cheap crystals or kind of the same type of ritual items that you can find, all over Amazon or in like certain retailers like Alibaba. And I was thinking about the other day, I had just realized that the Renaissance Fair is not going to be going on this summer due to the coronavirus. And I was like, super bummed because I love the Ren Fair. And I was thinking about how I really personally enjoy shopping at the Ren Fair and why that was in particular. And I realized, well, it's because everyone who has a shop at the Ren Fair is an artisan. And there's kind of workshops sometimes, and they show you how they do glass blowing or blacksmithing, or, they're a potter and they're selling stuff that they made by hand. And I think that's so awesome. And I would love to see our community events and our large scale events be focused on having shops and vending booths that sell things that are more handmade and less mass produced. But that's just, my opinion. I definitely don't want to put anyone down who does resell items that they purchase from like another retailer or anything like that. But I just really love that handmade quality to certain items. And I love the idea of attending a pagan event that I could, connect with different artists, and talk to them about what they create. So ideally, if this was the case, that there would also be workshops. So not only would you have someone, selling their handmade, wands that they made, but they would also be like a workshop where they would show you how to make your own, or maybe they're selling their jewelry and then they also have a workshop where they show you how you could create your own like Mjolnir necklace like this, for example. And that would mean, definitely there would need to be a bit of a different structure. And as I understand it currently, many of the large pagan events and spaces, they don't really tend to pay the people that do provide workshops and educational classes. And if they do pay them, they don't really pay them that much. So if I could have my ideal pagan community event, I would definitely pay people to do educational workshops that were very hands-on, where you could kind of walk away with an awesome homemade ritual item. So that's one thing that definitely came to my mind. And I guess the reason that I feel educational workshops are so important is that my personal view of witchcraft and paganism is that it's not just a spiritual system, it's also a path towards relearning the skills of our ancestors. And that's something that I've really been trying to take more seriously lately, because when I think about my own life, there are so many skills I don't yet know. Over the years, I've tried to become more sustainable and get better at cooking and baking and gardening, and I really hope to do more once I do have my own home. But I would really love to attend workshops where I could learn more complex skills. For example, creating a besom or a witch's broom. I would love to have a workshop where I could learn that from an expert. Or maybe a blacksmith class where I could make a candle holder. There's so many fascinating opportunities for us to really learn these skills from each other. And these skills, I think, can really enhance our own personal spiritual practices. And on this general theme, one of the communities that's really been inspiring me a lot lately is the John C. Campbell Folk School, which is in North Carolina, I believe. And it's kind of like this camp for adults where you attend the folk school for like a week and you stay there on campus and you spend that whole week learning a particular skill like blacksmithing or baking or jewelry making. And I can totally see how amazing taking this idea could be and then bringing something similar into the witchy and pagan community. So I envision, a school with the similar structure where it would be like a week-long class where people could actually stay on the campus and they could pick a ritual item to make from scratch, for example. So say you took a class on wand making. Well, you would spend some time learning about the different varieties of wood and the spiritual significance of the different trees. You could do a ritual to kind of ask permission from the tree before taking some wood, and then you would learn how to properly care for the wood and how to carve it. You could just kind of see so many different opportunities. Or maybe it's a foraging class for wild herbs, and then you could later learn how to use those herbs in various tinctures and things like that. So I see so much potential with a school like that for our community where we could relearn some of these skills. So that's kind of, obviously we're talking about ideal community spaces, and that's something that I've thought, a lot about, and I would love to see something like that exist, and maybe I can make that happen in a certain way in the future. So the second point I wanted to bring up when it comes to our pagan events that we attend, both big and small, is the concept of generic versus specific rituals. So those of you who have attended pagan events in the past, you're probably familiar with, they usually have, at least one group ritual that is open to the public. And I've attended a lot of these group rituals, and some of them have been wonderful and amazing. But overall, I find that many of them tend to be fairly generic and kind of tend to be very Wiccan in ritual structure. And one of the more difficult aspects to building pagan communities is that there are so many different faiths and spiritualities and traditions that do fall under that pagan umbrella. So when we are trying to do a ritual for a large group of people, and we know that they all have different spiritual traditions and ideas and beliefs, it's almost impossible to create a ritual that won't offend any one of those groups. So the people who create the rituals, they have to be so vague in order to not upset any one of the different groups or the different spiritual beliefs or communities. So on the one hand, that's great because it's not going to offend anyone and everyone is going to enjoy the ritual. But at the same time, for me personally, when the ritual structure and terminology is so generalized, I personally find I don't get much power out of it, or it doesn't really have as much resonance. And that's just because, there are so many different spiritual beliefs within paganism. It's almost impossible to try and create something that's going to connect with all of them. So I would kind of change that up a little bit. So for example, say you are planning a group ritual for a pagan event. Instead of just having, one big giant group ritual and trying to make it appeal to, Wiccans and Norse pagans and voodoo practitioners and traditional witches, it might make more sense to have a few different group rituals. So you might have a Wiccan ritual at 9 a.m., a Norse pagan ritual at 10, a voodoo ritual at 11, and then a traditional witchcraft ritual at noon. That way, people could kind of see what these ritual structures are like in the different traditions. And I think that could help people really figure out, well, what do I personally resonate with? And what do I connect with? And because the rituals would naturally be a little bit smaller, you might be able to have a greater connection with the other members in the ritual and just kind of with spirit or the various aspects of divinity as well. So that's just, one of my opinions. Obviously, I think there are a lot of benefits to big group rituals, but I do think we miss out by making things a little too generic, and that it could be helpful to really kind of focus in on specific traditions and really kind of see what they're about. Give them some room to breathe. So it's not all Wiccan stuff. But that is just my own 2 cents there. And of course, I know that many people aren't going to agree with that, and that's fine. And especially I've noticed that those pagans in the previous generation, they seemed to focus their community events around creating kind of a big tent pagan community where they really focused on creating like a governing body and a community where they could kind of have a seat at the table of the other major religions and be taken seriously by the other major religions. And from that kind of form institutions and bylaws that could really kind of provide more structure to the pagan community as a whole. And I find that in my generation, many of us are really skeptical when it comes to governing organizations or institutions, and that many of us really kind of prefer to forge our own paths. So I think that there is a bit of a tension there between pagans in the previous generation and pagans in the current generation, or the millennials and Gen Z. And while I think it's great what they did in helping our community grow strong and really kind of changing public perception of pagans, I do find that us millennials and even Gen Z are really kind of looking for a bit of a different type of pagan community. So instead, in my ideal pagan community, I think we would have maybe more smaller local groups that are a bit more decentralized, that are focused on different specific traditions that aren't just Wiccan in nature. And I would love to see a mentor and apprenticeship style system in these small groups so that people could really learn from other members in the community. And I know that this is quite a bit of a different method from the kind of big tent pagan system that was tried, a few decades ago. But I do see a lot of advantages in having kind of a bit of a more decentralized system without a governing body where people could, try out different paths and learn from people in those different communities so that they can decide which path is going to fit them best. And of course, it doesn't mean that you're locked into that path for life. Many of us do transition in and out of different pagan paths. So for example, I started out in Wicca and I'm transitioning a little bit away from Wicca into more of a Norse pagan path and a bit more of a traditional witch path as well. So next I want to hear your thoughts. So do keep in mind and do please be kind in the comments. These are of course my own 2 cents on some of the things I would love to see more of in our pagan community, but I want to hear from you next. So what kind of events and structures of those events would you love to see in the community? So please do comment that down below. And also one of the things I wanted to mention is that I do really want to actively work to build this community. And one of the big goals for my Patreon is I want to use some of the finances from that to build a physical temple or meeting space, because I do really feel that community is so important. And even though I do enjoy our online spaces and our online communities, I do see a great need for physical communities as well. So if you also love the idea of creating physical meeting houses and temples, I do hope you will consider joining our Patreon family so that we can help make that a reality together. So thank you guys so much for watching this video today. I'm looking forward to reading all of your responses on what your ideal pagan community would be like. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next week. Bye.